Hi, I'm Chris Duncan, County Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences here in Oldham County, and today we're going to talk about canning. Canning is an advanced cooking skill, but it's something that can be learned. There's lots of information available. You want to use good, reliable information from the University of Kentucky or the National Institute of Preservation or your Ball Canning Association. So there are basically two ways to can. There's the water bath canning, and then there's pressure canning. In the water bath, we do our high acid foods. We do things like pickles and sauerkraut and fruits and jams and jellies can be done in the water bath. Now, in the pressure canner, you have to do your vegetables. Vegetables need to be pressure canned to 240 degrees in temperature-wise, Fahrenheit. So you can only do that in a pressure canner. So our green beans have to be done in a pressure canner. Tomatoes kind of sit on the borderline. You can do tomatoes in a water bath canner, but it takes about 90 minutes. You can do them in the water bath canner in only 25 minutes. So, and that's for quarts. There are all sorts of charts available for doing different kinds of canning, or different size of canning jars. One important thing is to be sure that you use two-piece canning lids. Now, your canning lids, the ring can be reusable as long as it's not dented or has any rust, but the actual lid has only a one-time use, and you don't boil these, but you need to know that they need to be nice and clean and that they need to be warm, because the little seal will be what determines the safety of your product. Now, temperature and sealing are probably one of the most important things to remember. Your water bath canner gets your temperature to 210 degrees. No matter how long you boil the water, it's not going to go over that temperature. You will lose water. You'll have to add water during that 90 minutes if you're doing tomatoes. The pressure canner goes to 240 degrees, and that's where you kill the bacteria Clostridium botulinum, which is a botulism, and that's what happens in canning. That is what will make people sick, and it can actually kill people. So that's why when you go to can, you have to follow the directions, and you have to pay close attention to what you're doing. It's not something you can babysit children or watch TV while you're doing it. You have to pay close attention to what you're doing, because making sure the jars are clean, the temperature is correct, and the pressure is correct is very important. So there are some things that you want to be sure that you have a seal. Once your canning is finished, you will know it's sealed by tapping on the jar. And if you don't hear something, I have a jar here that didn't seal. If you hear a little popping sound when you touch the top, this jar is not safe to eat, and the food in here needs to be discarded. So, and I would be sure to discard the ring too. So this is definitely not a vacuum seal. So you would get rid of that type of material. And occasionally your rings, when you store your finished product, you take the rings off, because they will rust onto your jar if you're not careful. And these lids can be bumped, and then you'll have to discard your food too. So I put them back on when they travel, but for storage, and by the way, storage needs to be in a nice, cool but not cold environment. You don't store these in an attic. You cannot store them in a basement, or I'm sorry, not in a garage. So that's not heated and temperature controlled. But your canning is good for a year. And then after a year, it starts losing nutrients. So it loses about 10% of its nutrients every year, and flavor. And so after about 10 years, you're going to have a jar of mud. It's important to be sure that you just can what you can consume in a year. Now, there's lots of little good gadgets available for canning. If you're just starting out, I would recommend this small, easy to learn little bit of equipment. You don't have to go out and invest in a big canner. We used to call these coal packers. You don't have to invest in one of those. You can just use a nice stock pot. You do need to have something to keep the jars off the bottom of the pan. So this little basket, or if you don't want to even invest in this, and this is only about $10, you can put a towel down in the bottom, anything to keep the jars from touching the bottom of the pan. So water bath canning is probably where you want to start. It has lots of variety in what you can can. You can do pickles and jam. A lot of people like to do salsa. We have some beautiful sauces that we made in 4-H, and lovely pickles that were in the county fair, and some delicious jam. Actually, this is chutney. So there's lots of wonderful things you can do in your canner, and there's little tools you can use. You want to get a jar lifter, and these can be purchased in little sets. This will help you fish the lids out of the water. It's a nice little magnetic wand. And you'll need a funnel to put the materials in your canning foods into your jar. And then there's some neat little things you can get. This little jar holder, because you are working a lot of heat and steam, and you can get burned, and so you have to remember safety first. Water bath canning is where you want to start. There's so much great produce available in Oldham County. Either grow your own or purchase it at the farmer's market, and you don't have to invest a lot of time and equipment in it. So we're going to talk about pressure canning in just a minute. Okay, with pressure canning, there's two basic types of pressure canners. And there's the one with the dial gauge, and then we have a pressure canner with a weighted gauge. And I've used both. Both of them are easy to get used to. With the weighted gauge, you want to double check and make sure that you can see light through the exhaust. Make sure it's good and clean. Make sure your canner's in good condition, that the rubber seal is not cracked. You want to make sure the handles are clean and nice and strong, and they're well attached. You don't have any broken places. Now, canners can be purchased at your big box stores, and they start about $70, and then you can get some very high-end ones for several $100s. But if you just want to do green beans and maybe tomatoes in your pressure canner, you can pick one up. And a lot of times they go on sale at the end of the year, so you can even get them cheaper. But $70 is about the beginning point to purchase a canner. Now, in the canner, just like the water bath canner, it's important to have something in the bottom, and they come with these trays. Some people will pick up pressure canners at yard sales, and sometimes these are missing. And again, if these are missing, then you can put a towel down in the bottom. Just do not let your jar sit on the bottom of the canner. And then the canner has to be lined up with the little, there'll be a marker, and then you will close the canner, and we'll show you a little bit more in a minute how these, they sometimes have to be jiggled around a little bit to get them to actually, to close correctly. There we go. And then, okay, once this is on the range, and by the way, you use your instruction book, and you always keep your instruction book. In fact, I even have it marked. Keep the instruction book with your canner. And you usually use white vinegar in your canner, and depending on the size of the canners, and they come in different sizes. I have a bigger one that I'll show you in a minute. It will tell you to add water, and then we add white vinegar to help keep the inside of the canner clean. When you put the weights on this one, and it comes with a 5-pound weight, a 10-pound weight, and a 15-pound weight. And you'll know how much weight to put on the canner by the recipe that you're using. And you do this all following the recipe. And one thing I want to stress is be sure you use a recipe that's been tested either by the University of Kentucky or by a reputable institution such as Purdue or the University of Georgia has lots of great information on canning too. So be sure you use standard recipes. Also another great resource is the Ball canning book, and they have some wonderful recipes. But following the directions, following the recipe, following the directions for your canner and following the recipe, you will not have any problems in your canning. One thing I haven't talked about is how much do you put in a canning jar? The canning jars come by the box, and if they're reusable, and every year you want to inspect them. When you go to use them, you want to make sure you have no little cracks or chips in them. If you do, you can discard them or use them for another purpose, a vase or something like that. But make sure they are thoroughly washed, and they have to be hot when you go to use them in the pressure canner. For the water bath canner, there is a method of using cold things. We used to call it cold packing, but we don't really recommend that. It's better to hot pack. If you cold pack, you'll get what we call floaters, and your products will usually float up to the top of your jar. You won't be able to put as much produce into your jar, and it's just not as practical. But for my canner, I weigh how much I want to put in the jar, and for green beans, it's about 2 pounds for each jar. So I weigh out my beans, then I wash them, and then I also bring them to temperature, to a boiling temperature before I put them in my jar, and my jar is hot. So I think I've just about covered everything with the pressure canner, and now we're going to show you how to put the things in the jar. Water bathing jam is not difficult, and even making jam is not difficult. And I've found something to even make it even easier, and actually this is fun. This is a jam maker that I purchased a few years ago. Normally when you go to make jam, you put it in a pan and you're stirring over your range for about 20 minutes. Well, the jam maker actually does this. You just put your crushed berries in, you add pectin, and this is this has a timer, and it will make the jam for you. It will actually tell you when to put the sugar in. So it is so easy to use. But we're going to talk a little bit about how to can it. We take our jar that's hot and our funnel, and we just take our raspberry jam that we made in our jam maker, and we just ladle in our jam. And we've already we've already filled several jars. This makes 4 half pints. And one thing we haven't mentioned is headspace. Headspace is the distance between where the food is and the top of the jar. Now, when you're doing jam, and the recipes will tell you this, when you're doing jam, you need 1/4 of an inch. And there's a little tool, and it comes with a little tool. You want about 1/4 of an inch. So it looks like I need to take out just a tiny, tiny bit. Let's see if I can do that with my scoop. Okay. All right, now let's see. About 1/4 of an inch from the top of the jar, and that's it. And then we take a cloth and we wipe the outside rim of our jar. Make sure it's good and clean, because we're going to put the lid. Oh, one thing we didn't do, and you don't have to do this too much with jam, but with your other canning, this is a bubble releaser, and you release any bubbles that might be down in the jam. So we'll get that out of the way. Okay, so we wipe off that lid again, or ring, and then we want to use our lifter, our little magnetic lid lifter, and then we add the ring. And just a reminder, don't boil those lids, just warm them. Wash them in nice hot soapy water, and then keep them in warm water till you're ready to can. Now I'm ready to put it in my water bath that's already nice and steamy on the range, and set it down with my other jars. We bring it up to boiling, and by the way, the water is 1 inch to 2 inches above the jar, and it's going to boil covered for 10 minutes. So, and you have to kind of watch it. You do not start canning, or you do not start timing your canning until it is actually boiling. So it's in the timing process, it's actually when it's boiling, not when it went into the canner. Okay, now we're ready to put some things in the pressure canner and show you how to can those green beans. Canning green beans is a little tricky, but if you follow the directions and you remember safety first, you won't have any problems. Your green beans need to be nice and hot. They usually are boiled for at least 5 minutes, but again, be careful of steam, and it's important to keep that away from you. Now, you want your jar to be hot, so not only is it nice and clean, and you can clean them in the dishwasher, and then it should be in hot water while you're preparing your green beans. Use a nice clean funnel, and we start ladling our green beans. Let me move this just a tiny bit closer. All right, since our jar is hot, I don't want to burn my hand. And we'll start ladling our green beans into our jar. Now, some recipes will say that salt is optional, and you can add them for flavoring. But you know, in the American diet, we have a lot of salt. So I never add the salt, but if you want to add some when you are cooking the beans, or actually when you bring the beans to your table, you can always add the beans or add the salt when you're at the table. Now, we're going to watch our headspace here. We need an inch of headspace with this recipe. And now I have a tendency to overpack, so I sometimes lose liquid in my canning, but I'm working on getting them ready for a blue ribbon at the state fair. So we use our bubble releaser, and then we're going to use our little check for our headspace. Could be just a tad bit more. And add that liquid so we have an inch. Whoop. Okay, get that out of the way. And let's double check again. And we need that nice clean cloth to wipe the top of our jar. Okay, and our little lid lifter is quite handy. And now be careful with your lid lifters. Sometimes you get two lids, so you want to make sure you just have one. And you add that. Then we need our canning ring. And you don't want to tighten these really, really tight, just finger tight, not any muscle involved there. Then you add your jar to your canner. Now this canner is a 23 quart, so we can put 7 quart jars into this canner. Once I have it totally filled, and I will already have my lid checked and make sure that I can see very easily through the exhaust lid, and this is placed on your canner, on your range, and you line up the little connectors here. Get it just positioned right, and it'll slide right in there once I get it. There we go. Okay, and then it goes tight. Now, the gauge for this one is right here, and what you'll have this on your range. It will be heating up, and we have 3 quarts of water and 2 tablespoons of vinegar in the bottom of this canner. Steam will exhaust. Starting right away, this little part over here, we call this the pidcock, it'll start just jiggling and sizzling and bubbling, and it'll be talking to you, you think, and you want to exhaust it for 10 minutes according to your canner directions. Now my canner says 10 minutes. If you have a smaller canner, it may vary. If you have a larger canner, so you'll exhaust steam for 10 minutes, then you will add the weight. And this has a 10-pound weight, and at that time the gauge will start moving up, and it goes to 11 for this particular recipe for green beans, and it has to stay on that 11 for 25 minutes. And this is where you need to be close to your canner, because you're going to be turning the temperature up and down so that temperature gauge, our pressure gauge, will stay at the 11. It's going to keep going if you leave your burner on high. So you'll have to turn it back, and then it might drop too low, so then you'll have to turn it back up. So you'll have to monitor that for 25 minutes to keep it right on the 11, or very, very close. And then after the 25 minutes, you remove the canner from the range, or the burner, the hot burner, and then do not remove the weight until the gauge returns back to 0. And then once that gauge is back to 0, then you can remove the weight and safely open the canner. And then always remember to open the canner away from your face. You don't want to get burnt by the steam, because it will be very, very hot, 240 degrees. But that's what we need to kill botuloma, Clostridium botulinum, which is botulism. You can't smell it, taste it, or see it, but it is deadly. Then we remove our jar, and actually your canner will be full. If you don't have enough beans or whatever you're canning to fill up the canner, put some water in a jar and just have an empty jar of water in your canner. But you remove your jar from the canner and be sure you put it down on a towel. Do not put it right down on the surface of your counter, and it needs to sit there for a good 24 hours before you move it. And then you should have a nice seal, and your jars, your canning product will be good for a good, actually it's good forever, but it only tastes good for about a year. So, you start losing nutrients and flavor after a year. So try to eat it up, and within a year. And we have charts to tell you how many beans to can, or how much beans to can if your family is a certain size. And we have lots of resources available here at the Extension office. We have recipes for you. It's also on our website. All sorts of canning information, how to make pickles, how to make salsa, how to can tomatoes, how to make sauerkraut. And sauerkraut is a lot of fun. It's a little bit labor intensive, but I used to make a lot of sauerkraut. So canning is a skill that you can learn. I do have classes available here at the Extension office, or if you have questions, you can just give me a call. We have information on our website. You can email us, or you can drop in, and I'll be glad to talk to you about how to can. We do test the lids with the pressure gauges. We can test these, and you need to get your pressure gauge tested every year or two. It's a good idea if you do a lot of canning. So I'll be glad to give your canner a thorough testing. If you pick one up at a yard sale, be sure that it has a book with it. If it doesn't, sometimes you can find those on the manufacturer's website. But if you can't find a book for it, don't use it. And frankly, the canners that have been made in the last 10, 15 years are a lot better than the really old ones. And we're finding that a lot of the old ones, the gauges will not work, and they need replacement parts. And by the time you replace the gauge and the replacement part, it's easier just to buy a new canner. So if you have any questions about canning, just give me a call or send me an email, and I'll be happy to help you. Remember, we have the resources of the University of Kentucky available for all the residents of our great county. Hope you have a great time canning, and enjoy what you can.